From the pulpit to the pews, from the altars of our ancestors to the congregations of today, our spiritual heritage has been rewritten, distorted, and in many cases, stolen. The time has come to reclaim what was taken. Welcome to Sankofa Sessions Podcast, where we unearth truth and break free from the colonial chains. Our spirituality has never been separate from our identity. But through colonization, indigenous African spiritual practices, especially ancestor veneration, were demonized and erased from mainstream faith. And yet some of the same practices condemned in African spirituality are often openly embraced in Christianity, Judaism, and Catholicism. Why is it when we as African descendants honor our ancestors, it's called witchcraft, but when Catholics pray to saints or Jews observe Yitzhak, it's called tradition? Family, let's set the record straight today. So as we set the record straight today, ancestor veneration is not about worship. It's about honor. It's about remembering, respecting, and staying connected to those who have paved the way for us. Honor thy mother and thy father isn't just about honoring our ancestors while they're living on earth among us, but even in the afterlife. In many African traditions, ancestors are seen as intermediaries between the living and the divine, much like how Catholic saints intercede on the behalf of believers, or how Judaism honors patriarchs and matriarchs through their prayers. Still not convinced? Let's take a look at how our ancestor veneration exists in other faiths. In Jewish tradition, Yitzhak is a memorial service held 4 times a year where prayers are offered, candles are lit, and names of the deceased are spoken aloud in remembrance. In these services, often congregants bring pictures, obituaries, and names of deceased loved ones that they want to remember. An altar is erected, usually consisting of a table with a white tablecloth. White candles are lit, and the ancestors' names are called. Prayers are made on the behalf of the departed loved one, as well as scriptures, poems, song, and even a sermon is offered. Yarsites are also held, which is a day of remembrance that marks the anniversary of a loved one's passing, with a 24-hour candle and a synagogue prayers. This is not just about remembering, it's a spiritual connection. Now, to all of my traditional biblical literalists out there, I want you to think about this. Jews are known to the world as the so-called chosen people, God's chosen people. Yet they practice ancestor veneration, whether they call it that or not. However, people yet demonize this spiritual practice. Catholics everywhere venerate saints, pray for intercession, and hold All Saints' Day to honor the deceased faithful. Churches are filled with images of those who have passed on, much like how African cultures keep ancestral altars and speak to those who came before them. Yet again, another example of ancestor veneration, and no one says anything. In African traditions, ancestors serve as spiritual guides and protectors, honored through offerings, storytellings, and rituals. But let's look closely at the Black church funerals, and you'll see the same practices, rituals, prayers, and songs in sacred spaces, long funeral processions symbolizing the journey to the ancestral realm, and even rituals like passing the children being passed over caskets as a direct connection to African spiritual beliefs. So let's take a moment to break this down and examine the hypocrisy of Black Christian church and how Black Christians practice ancestor veneration without even being aware, because it is a part of our culture. If you've ever been to a Black person's funeral, especially in the South, You know they can be long and drawn out. But it's good, especially from the South. The way we hold funerals are ancestor veneration in and of itself. Let's talk about it. At these occasions, it's held in high respect and high regards and dignity. We have a sacred ceremony in a sacred space, usually a church or house of worship. Rituals are performed as in prayers, scriptures, songs, words of honor, appreciation, and praise of the deceased. Flowers, pictures, obituaries are all forms of honoring the departed. We even have in some parts of the South the tradition of going to the house of the deceased before the funeral, gathering the immediate family together, praying for the family and the soul of the departed ancestor, as well as the dismissing of the body from the home, praying over the house to release the spirit of the deceased from the home. We even have, guess what, a long car processional to the homegoing service, behind the hearse, and to the burial site. At the burial site, yet again, rituals are performed, prayers are offered, songs are sung, and the committing of the body of the deceased to the ground, back to Mother Earth from which the body came. More recently, more and more people are starting to have a releasing of white doves that represents the soul of the loved one departed who is now joining the ancestral realm. Now in the Deep South, we also have an old custom, a real old ritual that I have seen and participated in from childhood, and that is having the young children from infant up to about 10 or 11 years old. They are passed from one side of the casket to another, from one adult to another. And it is said that this ritual or tradition keeps the spirit of the deceased from harming or visiting the child. All of this is still practiced in the Black church community today. Yet many have the nerve to demonize ancestor veneration when we are the most famous example for practicing it, but not being aware of what it looks like for us. So family, we have to ask the question, why is it that when our people honor our ancestors, it's labeled as demonic? But when it happens in other traditions, it's sacred. The answer is simple. It's colonization. By labeling African spiritual practices and spirituality as evil, colonizers ensured that our people would never turn to our own ancestral wisdom for liberation. They needed us to see ourselves as lost, broken, and in need of saving by them. But that ends today. Yet again, I say, it's time to wake up. It's time to reclaim our birthright. We must deconstruct the lies we've been fed and embrace the wisdom of those who came before us. Honoring our ancestors doesn't mean rejecting faith. It means deepening it. Remember this, the truth has always been here. Now the question is, will you reclaim it? Until next time, family, keep seeking, keep questioning, and most of all, keep remembering. This is Sankofa Sessions Podcast with your host, Chief Apostle Veronica Israel, the podcast where we take you back into the glorious records of our past to get clarity on our collective bright future. Always remember that you are powerful, you are creative, and you are the epitome of the divine consciousness that created the universe. You are God in flesh, having a human experience, and never let anyone tell you otherwise. And stay woke, stay free, and stay in the light. And until next time, peace be with you.